I want you to imagine being stationed at an isolated military outpost where the silence of the night is your closest companion. A place so far removed from normal life that reality begins to blur with the unknown. Tonight, we'll walk you through one soldier's bone-chilling account of an encounter in war-torn Kandahar, Afghanistan. Welcome to the Nightside Archive. This is the Night Watcher of Kandahar, a soldier's eerie tale. It was the summer of 2012, and Sergeant Daniel Ramirez was stationed in one of the remotest outposts of Kandahar province. The terrain was desolate, just jagged mountain ranges and dry basins stretching to the horizon. The days were punishing, with scorching sun and unrelenting heat. But it was the nights that truly turned the base into a shadowy abyss, an otherworldly realm where normal rules of perception ceased to apply. Ramirez was accustomed to the peculiarities of combat deployment. Disorienting noises, flashes of light, paranoia setting in during long patrols. But this night felt different right from the start. The air was unnaturally still. Not a single breeze whispered through the camp, and even the crickets held their silence. The rest of the squad retreated to their bunks within the makeshift barracks, leaving Ramirez alone on watch duty. If there were two things you could always count on in Kandahar, they were sandstorms and stray dogs wandering the outposts. But tonight, there were neither. Midnight approached. The faint green glow of his night vision goggles scattered the shadows of the camp into eerie shapes. As Ramirez leaned against the sandbag wall of his post, something caught his attention. A figure standing far out in the open desert beyond the camp's perimeter. At first he thought it might be a civilian stray, or maybe one of the many shepherds who inhabited that region. But as he focused, he realized how utterly wrong he was. The figure didn't move like a person, not fully, at least. It seemed aware of being watched. Its outline was obscured, flickering like a flame in the wind, impossible to pin down. The hair on the back of Ramirez's neck stood on end. The soldier toggled his radio. "Command, do you copy? We've got a possible breach, roughly 300 meters out, requesting confirmation." As he waited for a response, the figure began to move, or rather shift, weaving closer to the outpost, yet almost appearing to glide over the uneven terrain. Now, Ramirez wasn't new to combat scenarios. He had served several tours and had learned to trust his gut. But something primal, deep within the recess of his mind, warned him to hold back. He radioed again, his voice steadier now, but tinged with urgency. "It's moving. It's coming this way. Awaiting orders." Silence replied. All channels were dead. He grabbed the rifle and aimed, but the thing kept approaching. No wind, no sound accompanied the movement. As the seconds stretched into what felt like eons, the figure reached the barbed wire barrier surrounding the base. Ramirez's finger hovered over the trigger, every nerve in his body screaming at him to pull it. But then, it stopped dead. Right there, at the boundary. It was close enough now that he could make out its contours even beyond the green tint of his goggles. And that's when he saw it. Its eyes. They weren't human. They weren't eyes you could describe in any conventional way. No irises, no whites, no pupils. Just voids, endless abysses radiating a malevolent energy that sent chills rippling through Ramirez's entire being. The air around him felt charged, like static electricity before a lightning strike. And still, the figure did nothing. It just stared. At that moment, Ramirez recalled what an Afghan translator had once warned him. Local villagers often spoke of the Night Watcher, a spirit said to haunt lonely outposts in the dead of night. It was drawn to soldiers consumed with inner fear or guilt, feeding on their vulnerability. He'd laughed it off then, brushing it away as local superstition. But now, here it stood, or floated, just meters in front of him. Ramirez whispered a prayer under his breath. He didn't remember when, but at some point he had stopped breathing. Summoning all his courage, he yelled at it. "Identify yourself. This is a military zone." His voice cracked, reverberating only inside his own head because the figure didn't flinch or react. Then it stepped through the wire. Everyone on base knew the barbed wire was rigged to a series of sensor alarms, capable of detecting even the smallest breach. But the figure moved through it effortlessly, as though the barrier didn't exist. No alarms, no sparks, nothing. It was inside now. In pure survival mode, Ramirez unloaded his rifle. Burst after burst of rounds tore into the night, cracks of gunfire echoing long after the bullets found their mark, or didn't. Because when he stopped to reload, the figure was gone. Not fallen, not fleeing, just gone. The next morning, commanders reviewed footage from the thermal cameras set up around the perimeter. They found nothing. Despite Ramirez's report and the countless rounds he had fired, there was absolutely no evidence of anyone or anything breaching the outpost. He was pulled aside by his commanding officer later that day. "Ramirez, are you sure about what you saw?" the officer asked cautiously, a hint of concern in his voice. Ramirez could only nod. He knew what he had experienced was real. But how could he prove it? Oddly, Ramirez wasn't reprimanded or even questioned further. However, a week later, he was repositioned away from the outpost, transferred to another unit without much explanation. Years later, Ramirez found himself in a veterans group chat, sharing stories with others who had served in Kandahar. His tale, once ridiculed even by himself, was met with an eerie silence. Then, slowly, others began chiming in with their own accounts of the same figure, a gliding, flickering silhouette with soul-piercing eyes. And like Ramirez, none had been believed. So the question lingers. Was the Night Watcher a figment of their collective imagination, born from the stress and paranoia of combat? Or was something ancient and otherworldly haunting the sands of Kandahar? One thing is certain. Ramirez doesn't patrol the night anymore. And after hearing this story, maybe you'll think twice about what watches you in the dark.